war in the Middle East, we had the announcement of Donald Trump, the president of the United States, that there are going to be some sort of talks for 2 weeks, 2 weeks of ceasefire, to talk, to negotiate, to do something about putting an end to the conflict. And it doesn't seem that Israel is happy with that. But what is, Ted, when it comes to Israel? Because we had the attack on Lebanon, they don't like it. It doesn't seem Netanyahu likes it, and it's what is happening right now is not something new. Here is what John Kerry, former Secretary of State, said about Benjamin Netanyahu.
Sat across the table from Prime Minister Netanyahu more than almost anyone else out there, and he and Israel are, of course, big factors here. There's been recent reporting, you probably saw in the New York Times, that Netanyahu was taken into the situation where he basically pitched Trump on attacking Iran. Were you ever a part of any conversations like that? I know he's made that pitches to past administrations. Were you ever a part of that? And were you surprised that he was able to convince Trump to do this?
Well, I was part of any number of conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu, conversations that took place in other countries.
Pitching the U.S. to strike Iran.
Yes, he wanted us to strike. He came to President Obama. He made a presentation to ask to strike. President Obama refused. President Biden refused. President Bush refused. The only president who has agreed to this, obviously, is President Trump. And it's really...
Yeah. Ted, what is your understanding of what's going on right now with the
case
of...
I'm probably not the best person to ask in terms of knowledge of the political subtleties, but I do have a view. It appears by every measure and action Netanyahu has made, not only recently, but over the years, that his objective, what he would like to do, is to destroy Iran as a functioning state. He would like to turn it into a failed state, a state of fragments that would be fighting among the fragments fighting among themselves, much like what he accomplished with the help of the United States, the incompetent help of the United States in Syria. I mean, what he wants to do is create a political vacuum in Southwest Asia with regard to states that could potentially oppose Israeli military and expansionist objectives, so that once these states are no longer functioning, once they're failed states, then it's much easier to go about your business, because it's the old divide and conquer kind of mindset. And that is pretty clearly what he is up to, what he has been up to what he has wanted to do for a long time. Now, besides the issues of morality, which of course should be important, although in his case there's no detectable moral concerns of any kind that we can see in this man. But besides the question of morality, there's the question of practicality. I mean, do you really want a failed Syrian state, for example, where we now have basically Al-Qaeda in charge? I mean, it's laughable. It's not laughable, unfortunately. It's serious that the United States is trying to pretend that the current situation in Syria is better than having the situation in Syria where al-Assad was in charge. It doesn't mean that one thinks that Assad is a good choice if one could make the optimal choice, but when you look at the world you're given, you try to do your best, and you try at least not to do more damage than already has been done, and you basically stay out of it. if you can't do anything. And of course, if you look at the history of American and also British involvement in Iran, it's the same situation. The situation in Iran is totally a product of American and British interventions. In 1953, I mean, you know this better than I do. You're a refugee from there, but you had a democracy. Mossadegh was elected fair and square, and like any leader, and I want to underscore, any leader who wants to do what's right for his country, not for other countries that are looking to take an opportunity and take the resources that Iran has and steal it for themselves. Mossadegh wanted to nationalize the oil industry. He wanted to make sure that the Iranian people got a fair share of the wealth that was produced by the oil, in the natural resources in Iran. And what happened is the Americans and the British basically ran a campaign against them. They falsely accused them of being a communist. All kind, the normal, what I should say, the normal operational procedures. And they destroyed them, and they overthrew the government, and they put a dictator in, the Shah, who was a very brutal dictator. And certainly they gave him lots of things that probably they should not have, including a lot of support for a nuclear energy program, nuclear power program, which was not really needed given the enormous natural fossil fuel-based resources that Iran had and still has. And but they created a program that Iranians rightfully are very proud of their contributions to. I mean, it's now a cultural thing. I mean, I was working with a colleague of mine in my research group, a wonderful man, Sir John Thompson, who was a British permanent representative to the UN, who, unlike many of his colleagues, was an honorable man. And when we talked about the Iranian, he knew a lot about Iran, and he had been involved in the Middle East. And he said, look, Iranians now have a great cultural pride in this nuclear energy program they have. You can't expect them to give it up. That was his view. And he had all kinds of very intelligent ideas, really innovative ideas, on how to help Iran develop this technology further, while at the same time creating powerful incentives for Iran to not build nuclear weapons with the technology. I won't go into his, but he was just, nobody would listen to him. But it was just really amazing, because it would have been good for Iran and it would have been good for the Western countries, these ideas he had. And then, of course, there was this tremendously negative development of the extremist Islamic elements taking control of the Iranian government. Iran is really quite a modern state. You know better than I do about this. And it has a long historical culture where education and professional standards have been very high. And of course, the country was really not well suited for this quite repressive Islamic government. But that's what they got. But that was American behavior. That was a result of the American and British interventions. Then we got this agreement on the enrichment of uranium that the Iranians agreed to, and it was a very good agreement in terms of constraining Iran from building a nuclear weapon.
You mean JCPOA, which was signed by John Kerry?
The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, and the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was absolutely airtight with regard to providing Iran with relief from sanctions, which was needed by Iran, and Iran for a short time got the benefit of that until we snapped back in a totally improper and unfair way, and the rest of the world got the confidence that Iran was working with nuclear technology, but in a way that would not result in nuclear weapons. So it was a perfect agreement. But then the Americans, in this case Donald Trump, just decided this agreement was no good. I mean, the interesting thing about Trump is he has these, well, it's not a surprise. Oh, it's a terrible agreement. Well, explain it. Explain what it's. I know quite a bit about the JCPOA, and
I believe he was repeating what Netanyahu told him. He didn't know anything about it.
Well, but see, the problem is, to get us back on the original question you asked about Netanyahu, Netanyahu is irrational. I think perhaps, I don't know if he's mentally unstable or not, if you would call him. I mean, with Trump, it's much clearer that he's mentally debilitated, but there's something really wrong with Netanyahu, whether, I mean, the man is completely without any moral guide of any kind. He's just, he's a psychopath. I mean, he is a psychopath. He doesn't manifest it in exactly the same ways that Trump manifests it, but in terms of his moral commitment to anybody, including the Israeli people, I mean, this man has destroyed Israel. I mean, it's destroyed Israel because people like me who were not hostile to Israel, in fact, I still have many friends in Israel who are suffering greatly under Netanyahu's leadership and who disagree with him. He's turned Israel into an international pariah. And I don't want anything to do with the Israeli government. I'll never go back to Israel again. I just don't want anything to do with them. And he's played a major role in turning Israel into a functioning fascist state. It is a fascist state. I mean, when you see the attitudes of a large fraction, not everyone, but that you don't need everyone, a large fraction of the Israeli population, they have become basically functioning fascists, and their attitudes are criminal. You have interview. I mean, I just saw an interview just yesterday. I had to show it to my wife because I was so upset by it. This woman was asked, she was on, there was no trick involved. The journalist was just talking to this person. It was clear the journalist was not trying to trap the woman into saying anything improper by disguising who they were. They were American journalists. And they asked this woman about killing children in Gaza. And her response was, well, they grow up to be Arabs. I mean, I just could, I just could, and there were a whole bunch of other interviews of this type. In fact, in this particular video, which were, and this appears to be a very common attitude. It's not the attitude among my friends, I should say. The people, I would not engage with people who have the, but it's very common. And it's this kind of attitude that has led to the slaughter in Gaza and the carpet bombing of southern Lebanon now. And I mean, this is all due to, I shouldn't say it's all due to Netanyahu. It's due to Netanyahu's political skills, which are substantial, although he's evil, and evil is the right terminology, although it's oversimplified. But you have this evil man who's incredibly skilled politically. Incidentally, so was Adolf Hitler. You know, I'm in Germany here, and I have many friends, and of course, World War II does come up in discussions. It's hard not to in a place like in Germany. And I just last night I was having a conversation with some friends, and I just said, well, you know, Hitler was a very talented man, and they kind of reacted. And I said, well, you have to, you know, he was evil, but you can't, you know, you can't ignore that these people can have skills, because it's these skills that if they were just evil and they didn't have skills, they wouldn't be so dangerous. But this Netanyahu is he's only appears to be concerned about himself, although maybe he has a distorted belief in making this Israel into this greater Israel, whatever that is. But he has destroyed Israel, not only in terms of undermining the basic society in a profound way. You can't get soldiers who are snipers to shoot children unless they think it's right. And when you see that kind of thing, that's beyond simple war crime. It has something to do with some sickness in the society that is somehow become acceptable. You just can't allow it. Can't have, and the officers who oversee the snipers are equally sick. In fact, they're worse. So you can't have, you know, so these kind of phenomena are just clear indications that the society has descended into some kind of fascist state, very dangerous, murderous form of fascism, and racist form of fascism. You know, I guess that's part of fascism. But Netanyahu is not alone. He's part of this group of people, some of which I won't say I grew up with, but some of which whose attitudes I had seen as a young child when I was in an immigrant Jewish community, where these people would talk about Jews being the chosen people and somehow being superior. And even as a very young person, you know, 11, 12, I just found it objectionable. I don't know why, because a lot of people around me found it no problem with it, but I just found it objectionable, and it carried on into my adulthood. I always found myself very critical of this dangerous strain, you know, thread in religious Jewish culture. Now, that's not to say that all people have these ideas, but if you foster it and you encourage it, and it takes over, because as it has in Israel now, you get a state that's functionally a fascist state, and that's what we now see. And that's not just Netanyahu; he has been the orchestrator, but there was a lot there to begin with. It's just like in Nazi Germany. There was a lot there to create the monster that Hitler created in Nazi Germany. You know, it wasn't just Hitler. He was very skilled. He was able to manipulate the society and the culture given the circumstances. And now you have a similar situation in Israel, and it's just horrifying, at least for me. Now, the other problem that Israel has now gotten, and I hope there are Israelis listening to what I'm about to say, is that a very large percentage of Americans, and I would include American Jews, now see Israel as a fascist state. And they do not like that Israel is getting these tens of billions of dollars of support from the United States to continue doing this monstrous murder of people all around them. And there are a lot of people, myself included, who are strong advocates for ending all aid from the United States to Israel. Now, if that happens, I don't think it will easily happen, because the Israeli lobby, this ultra-wealthy group of American Jews who are more loyal, and I'm going to say this, I wouldn't normally, who are more loyal to Israel than they are to the United States, which they are citizens of. If they feel so loyal to Israel relative to the United States, then this is something I would never normally say. Then I think they should renounce their American citizenship and go to Israel, because this is unacceptable. I'm an American first. I'm a citizen of the world, and I have responsibilities as a citizen of the world, and I have responsibilities as an American citizen. And my country is not, if I have anything to do with it, and I will try everything I can, my country will not become dominated by Israeli interests, Israeli monstrous and fascist and murderous interests, and to do the dirty work of a bunch of people who all should be nullified and either be in prison or be in a place where they can't do any harm to anybody else. It's just unacceptable to me as an American. So, and I'm an American first. That's the way I feel. So Israelis who think that they're going to get a lot of help after this war is over in the form of unconstrained amounts of money, because it's basically unconstrained American gifts to Israel. We sell them arms, but then we have all these special programs which pay for the arms. So all these Israeli arms, they're not paying for these arms. They're being gifted to Israel. So my position as an American citizen, if I could advocate a new policy in a new government, which I hope we'll be seeing, because I think Trump is going to be thrown out, although it's not clear exactly when and how. I would advocate all aid to Israel be stopped. I think Israel has gone over the edge, and they no longer should be further supported to do this murderous stuff that they are doing by the United States. So I would immediately stop all arms shipments to Israel immediately, if I could. It won't happen right now, but I think that's what I could. If they have no bombs, they can't continue killing people in Gaza the way they've been doing. They can't continue carpet bombing Lebanon. I'm not for the destruction of Israel, but it has to be reformed, and it has to be a state that is a non-apartheid state. If it's going to survive, if it's going to get my support as an American, and I want to be clear, I'm speaking as an American now. I forget the fact that I come from a Jewish background. Forget it. It's irrelevant. I'm speaking as an American. And this is unacceptable to me as an American. And I think there are a lot of other Americans who feel this way. It's no longer a minority. And so those Israelis who think there's no negative side to this beyond what's already happening, which is, of course, negative enough, need to think about what the future is, because without the tens of billions of dollars of support for this country, it is not going to continue to survive and prosper the way it has. So I think there are some big changes going to happen in the next years ahead. It's not going to happen instantly, but the reaction among American citizens right now is swinging very strongly against what is happening in Southwest Asia, very strongly. Some of these polls show 70% of Americans are against this war. They're not all overtly against, they're not for it, or they're, but to have no more than 25 or 30% of your citizens for the war, when 15% of them, of course, are these extremist Christian sects who think that when the end of the world occurs, it'll be, happening in Israel, or, it'll all happen with the end of the world in Israel, coming in Israel. I mean, you are down to a very small percentage of people who are among thinking Americans when you look at the attitudes of the great majority of Americans. And my greatest concern right now is, as the pendulum swings, and it will swing, it is swinging, that people do things in a sensible way, that it not swing in a way that is not, I don't know, swing too far is the wrong way. It's too simple-minded, it's too one-dimensional, but that people not do things that are counterproductive toward bringing peace and stability to Southwest Asia. But I think the American public is moving in that direction, and I think we're going to see some big changes. And the question is the American political establishment up to implementing those changes? And that I basically thinking of the young Democrats, because the older Democratic establishment needs to be swept aside, and the Republicans who are decent, honest people who have been offended and recoil from what Trump and the Republican Party has become. There are a lot of Republicans who are very decent. They're conservative politically, and that's fine. I have no problem. I have no problem with that. These people have to retake control of their party as well. And there has to be a cooperative move toward bringing the United States into a more stable configuration where it's not posing such a threat to the entire world. Because the United States is posing this threat. When we blindly provide Israel with the means to do what it's doing, we are part of the problem. There's no question about it. So anyway, that's my reaction to the question of Netanyahu. He has to be stopped. He has to be thrown out of office. The Israelis are the ones who have to do it. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know the terrain of the politics. Israel is in big trouble. They have this extremist religious component in the country. It's been a problem for a long time. It's now become such a problem that it's taken over, and the forces needed to retake control of the country are largely suppressed at this point. And I don't know if things can swing in the other direction. I just don't understand the landscape in Israel well enough, the political landscape. But if it doesn't happen in Israel, it has to happen from outside. And the United States is the outside player that can and should do this. And as an American, I'm going to do everything in my power to see that happen. So,
yeah. Ted, when it comes to the war, militarily looking at what has happened so far, and you see this sort of willingness on the part of Netanyahu to continue this war, what is militarily in his mind? Because so far we've seen the latest footages coming out. They're using interceptors that were produced in 2026, this year. So what is he planning for? What is happening in terms of the military operation and the strategic military operation in his mind?
If he understands the military situation, and I don't know how he wouldn't, but I know there are, I know Israelis who do understand the situation, I mean, when I was involved in exposing the Patriot fraud during the war of 1991, I just met an enormous number of first-rate Israeli military people, and afterwards, I don't quite understand why the Israelis were so interested in me, because it was more of an American issue from my point of view. But I just met an enormous number of very, very capable and really rather fine people. And I know these people understand, the military situation when they see it. And they have to understand that the military situation for Israel is desperate. The Hezbollah has reconstituted itself in Lebanon, and they are using a tremendous amount of drone technology now. They've adopted that technology to their for their combat purposes. They've destroyed a lot of Merkava tanks. It's that's a fantastic tank. I mean, the Merkava is a really impressive piece of technology, and they're being destroyed all over the place. You can't do what the Israelis have been doing in the past and lose all these tanks. And you can't have you can't have the Israeli Defense Forces taking casualties. Israel is like the United States. The United States is very sensitive to casualties. We in a place like Lebanon, where you have an organization like Hezbollah, I won't say, it's not that they care less about human life. I'm not suggesting that at all. But they are in a struggle for what they see as their survival. They're right. I mean, this is a struggle for survival. When you're in a struggle for survival, you are willing to take enormously more casualties than you would otherwise be willing to take. And we see that. And they also, of course, they come from an Islamic culture where martyrdom has a special place in the culture. I don't know if that's overemphasized. It turns out by accident I have many friends who are Islamic, but I don't claim to understand the culture that well, because these friends are, they're a pre-selected group by the accident. But if you talk about the Christian culture or the Jewish culture, being a martyr is also appropriate in appropriate circumstances. When the Israelis talk about fighting to the last person for their survival, they mean it. But they're not fighting to the last person for their survival at the moment. They're going out and murdering people who are largely innocent, who really would, just want to be left alone. And there are a lot of Israelis who are not willing to lose their lives over it. If I were in Israel, I'd be doing everything I could to avoid being out in combat. I'd be willing to fight and die for my country, but I'm not willing to fight and die to murder people who have nothing to do, who pose no threat to my country. And they're having a lot of problems. They're having a lot of people. They call up people, and a lot of them don't show. And that was unthinkable in Israel. The Israel I know from decades ago, you would never not show up if you were called up. You would be there, but you'd never shoot a child. That's also true at that time. So something has changed, and it's for the sociologists and anthropologists to study this in the future and explain it. But whatever has changed, it's clearly the situation now, and something has to be done about it. And I think it's going to have to come from the outside right now. It's going to have to come from the United States. So that's where I'm focused. But this guy Netanyahu, I don't think he knows what I think if you were to really get inside his head he doesn't care about Israel. I cannot imagine that anybody who is following the policies he is following and understands at any level what he's doing to Israel would care about his country. It's just, it's like Adolf Hitler turning Germany into a graveyard. Germany was a very powerful country when World War II was going on, but Hitler turned Germany into a graveyard. And that's what Netanyahu is doing. He's turning Israel into a graveyard. And, I'm horrified by it, but the only thing I know how to do is to try to influence American policies, because we're the ones we're the co-conspirators in this by allowing this to occur. So when Democrats, I basically am a Democrat, although, again, I have many Republican friends who I respect and talk with easily. But when Democrats start complaining to me about Trump, I say, well, look what Biden did. Biden, the first thing that should have happened after this terrible event of October 2023, he should have gone in there and he said, you cannot respond the way you are talking about responding. You cannot go in there and murder all these innocent people. This is a terrible thing. You have to deal with it, but you cannot go out and do the same kind of murderous, kind of genocidal thing that happened to you. And by the way, a lot of your people killed a lot of Israelis, and you better look at that too, because a lot of the Israelis who were killed in the incursion in October of 2023 were killed by Israeli forces firing indiscriminately at people who were taken prisoners. So it wasn't a simple situation. And we don't know all the details, but we do know some of them. And we do know that the Israeli Defense Forces played a significant role in the killing of Israeli citizens, in addition to Hamas. And nobody's talking about that. So this is all part of this campaign of misinformation, trying to take these incredibly brutal policies of the current Israeli government and blame everybody else for it. And it doesn't wash with me and a lot of other Americans who are looking at the situation. And something has to be done. And unfortunately, it's going to take time, but hopefully it's going to happen. So, but we'll see. We'll see. But a lot of unfortunate deaths are going to, which shouldn't happen and shouldn't have happened, are going to continue to happen until this thing is brought under control. But Netanyahu, he has to be looked upon as, in some, I would say, in terms of his behavior, it really is very much like a Hitler. In this, I want to be clear about what I'm saying here. So when people react to what I'm saying, I want to be very clear what I mean here. Hitler showed no regard for the well-being of the German people. He murdered Germans as much as anybody else did. He was the one who caused the catastrophe in Germany. He was helped by a lot of people, just as Netanyahu is being helped by a lot of people. But the moral judgment about how Hitler behaved and who he was applies just as well to Netanyahu as to Adolf Hitler. No question about it. And someone wants to debate that with me, I'm happy to have that discussion. I'm not simply calling him a name. I'm talking about the moral behavior and his loyalty to his own people. He has shown himself to not care about the well-being of his own people and his own state. And somebody in Israel should do something about it.